of the regional powers, India had a special involvement at initial. The Bangladesh Liberation War took place at a time when the global order was in a state of flux. On the one hand, the influence of the then two superpowers, USA and USSR, had been on the wane but not totally absent. Moreover, the intensity of the Cold War between these powers appeared to be less than before. On the other hand, Russo-Chinese relations had a nosedive. In tandem, however, China was demonstrating its big power proclivities. The Bangladesh Liberation War took place against such a global context. In the regional context, the Indian role figured prominently as the country drew world attention with a cogent argument that the international community had a moral responsibility in stopping genocide in Bangladesh. As the Bangladesh war-induced power configuration emerged, it was found that two axial groups were operating, US-China and Indo-Soviet. The former group was anti-Bangladesh, while the latter pro-Bangladesh. Each group had its own axe to grind based on its national interest. Above all, the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War had its impact felt globally. This paper revisits the relevant narrative insofar as the involvement of the global and regional powers was concerned. Each section is devoted to each discussed power. Avoiding known factual details, analytical comments are concentrated on. The paper begins with a very brief discussion on the strategic importance of the region of South Asia, and wherein we have to find out Bangladesh's importance strategically and otherwise. And I suggested in that section that this geostrategic significance of the subcontinent has always drawn outside powers in global states. And in fact, the first time this strategic importance of the South Asian region was highlighted in 1903 by the then Indian Viceroy Lord Curzon. I quote him, "The Indian subcontinent, because of its geographical location, gradually assumed a significant place in international politics," unquote. So, this brief discussion on the strategic importance of the subcontinent, in fact, highlights why the outside powers got themselves involved in the Bangladesh Liberation War, from the beginning through to the end. First, the discussion on the United States comes up. The USA pursued an anti-Bangladesh policy ab initio. The determinants of this policy were specifically four. First, Pakistan had been a close ally since the 1950s. The determinants of this policy were specifically four. First, Pakistan had been a close ally since the 1950s. Second, Pakistan had been a dependable ally in US Middle East policy. Third, Pakistan was a conduit in thawing Washington-Beijing relationship. In such a context, the Bangladesh War burst upon the United States as an unwanted complexity. Fourth, personally, Nixon was anti-Indian. It is on record that during the 1969 trade, he was treated well in Pakistan, but not so in India. It remains arguable that such a personal factor could have any influence in the overall policy-making process, but with hindsight, it cannot be ruled out. Now, the phases of the policy. The US policy had three distinguished phases. First, strategic neutrality after July. This phase witnessed a call for political solution and flow of aid for the Bengali refugees in India. Between July and December, Washington had an entirely pro-Pakistan stance, but with an intent to avoid a slide into full-scale war. During this phase, Washington concentrated on ping-pong diplomacy to make friends with China. Consequently, this phase ended up as a fiasco as far as South Asia was concerned. Third, between the 3rd and 16th December, when the Indo-Pak War had been raging, the US policy was on one of clear-tailed to Pakistan. As the war neared the end with the backer of the Pakistani occupation forces, Washington made the last ditch attempt to save Pakistan by dispatching the 7th Fleet and trying to secure a ceasefire through the UN. The first failed because of quick appearance of the Soviet Mediterranean Fleet as a countervailing force, and the second had the same fate as the Soviet Union vetoed in the Security Council. Despite such an anti-Bangladesh stance of Washington, a large number of American politicians, intellectuals, and the media played a positive role in standing by Bangladesh. Of the politicians, Senator Edward Kennedy was ardently outspoken in critiquing the official policy. The recently made public US documents reveal that the debacle of Pakistan was something that the policymakers had a hunch about. On 6 March, Dr. Kissinger chaired a senior review group meeting wherein it was stated, quote, "The judgment of all of us is that with the number of troops available to here, a total of 20,000 with 12,000 combat troops, and a hostile East Pakistan population of 75 million, the result should be a bloodbath with no hope of West Pakistan re-establishing control over East Pakistan," unquote. Why did then Washington stick to its pro-Pakistan stance? The China factor comes up with requisite explanation. Washington sought China first, or foremost. And until the China issue was settled, Washington wanted its status quo in the subcontinent. Washington got China, but lost the South Asian diplomacy in 1971. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us have a few words on USSR. As for the determinants of the Soviet policy, we have to consider Moscow's consternation at Pakistan's virulent anti-Indianism and too much Chinese leaning. The Albany victory in the 1970 elections made Moscow optimistic that under the Albany government, relations with Pakistan would be satisfactory. But the Pakistan military crackdown sent out a message of grave concern. Under such circumstances, Moscow had to adopt a sympathetic attitude towards the Bangladesh war. On the other hand, Moscow was concerned that a prolonged liberation war would radicalize South Asia to the detriment of its close ally, India. Consequently, in the beginning, Moscow's policy was one of putting pressure on Pakistan for a political solution. Phases of policy. Between April and July, the Soviet policy could be called one of caution and ambivalence. At the 24th Congress of CPSU held on 30th March, Brezhnev called upon Moscow, quote, to eliminate hotbeds of war in Southeast Asia and Middle East and to promote a political settlement in those areas on the basis of respect for the legitimate rights of states and peoples subjected to aggression. Full use must also be made of the possibilities of the United Nations, repudiation of trade, or use of force in settling outstanding issues must become a law of international law, unquote. It was clear from the beginning that Moscow didn't want to break up of Pakistan, and in consequence of which emergence of a war ravaged Bangladesh. On 2nd April, therefore, Podgorny wrote to Yahya calling for stopping bloodshed and finding speedy political solution. It is to be noted that Podgorny's letter didn't mention Bangladesh, the word Bangladesh. On the contrary, it used words like East Pakistan and common masses of Pakistan. By June, the Indian Foreign Minister Sardar Saran Singh pleaded with Kremlin to come out more definitely in favor of Bangladesh, but to no avail. The second phase of the policy spanned the period between July and December. This phase was one of tilt and caution. The Soviet policy began to demonstrate a decided shift towards Bangladesh after the signing of the Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty on 9th August. From September through November, the Soviet policy had three apparent features. First, Moscow accepted the Indian view that the Bangladesh crisis was outside the jurisdiction of the United Nations. Second, Moscow wanted the liberation world to be pro-Soviet. Third, Moscow shared a common stance with Washington in averting a full-scale Indo-Pak war. But the war could not be prevented. Pakistani raid on the western border of India provoked the war on 3rd December, which continued up to the fall of Dhaka on 16th December. During these 2 weeks, as has been mentioned about Moscow, took 2 decisive steps in scuttling Washington's move to save Pakistan, but it is worth mentioning that on 6th and 7th December, Moscow tabled 2 resolutions in the United Nations providing for a just political solution within the framework of Pakistan, which however miscarried. It may therefore be said that the Soviet policy was never openly anti-Pakistan or pro-Bangladesh. Nevertheless, the overall impact of Soviet doings was conducive to the emergence of Bangladesh, and hence the popular contention that the Soviet Union was pro-Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, now a few words about China. There were 2 broad phases in the Chinese policy. First, China calculatedly refrained from supporting the Bangladesh war. Second, an unqualified support was extended to the Pakistan military regime. Such a policy stance remained unchanged even after repeated pleadings from Maulana Bhashani, supposedly a staunch Beijing ally. This policy had 2 discernible aspects. Up to 3rd December, Beijing cohorted with Washington in opposing Bangladesh, but refrained from using any anti-Bangladesh rhetorics. This didn't, however, mean that the doings of Beijing were not inimical to Bangladesh. But between 3rd and 16th December, Beijing was openly anti-Bangladesh, both in words and action. Beijing faced a dilemma vis-a-vis the Bangladesh war. On the one hand, its socialist ideology required support for the Bangladesh, but on the other, it had its national and strategic interests to be served. As it was, the latter imperative got the upper hand. The Chinese policy was revealed in the 2 initial documents. One is People's Daily and the other is the later of Shogun Lion, 13th April, written to Yahya Khan. I don't go into the details. A retrospective analysis reveals at least 5 determinants for such a policy. First, China is itself a multi-ethnic country and hence could not countenance a cessationist ethnic struggle. That's how China considered the Bangladesh war. In the past, China had always opposed such struggles in many countries. Second, China considered the Bangladesh struggle as had been provoked by India and Russia, and it was not a spontaneous one. Third, in the Chinese perception, The Bangladesh war was a bourgeois one, not for the sake of workers and peasants. Fourth, China didn't have any evidence that the Bengali freedom fighters had been inspired by the great book of Mao Zedong. Fifth, as the Mujibnagar government was located in India and as the Indian government had an overbearing influence on this government, Beijing was led to believe that Bangladesh would eventually be an Indo-Soviet satellite state, which would be inimical to Chinese interests. Finally, about India. The Bangladesh Liberation War, sans Indian assistance, would not have the history that it has been, would not have been the history that it has been. Indira Gandhi's statement on 10 January 1972 at the Delhi airport while welcoming Bangabandhu summed up the contours of Indian policy succinctly. She said, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman promised independence to his people, and he has fulfilled. I promise to send Bangladesh refugees back home with honor, to extend all help to freedom fighters, and to free Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the unquestioned leader of Bangladesh, from the Pakistani incarceration. I have also kept my promise, unquote. In fact, from the beginning to the end of the war, Indian support and assistance were of crucial importance to Bangladesh government, media, and the common people of India were found solidly by the Mujibnagar government. About 10 million refugees were given shelter, food, and medicine. In the state of Tripura, the number of refugees exceeded that of the locals. But the contributions of Indira Gandhi were above anyone or any quarter. As it appears in the retrospect, Indira Gandhi acted as the midwife delivering the Bangladesh baby, as it were, through something like the Caesarean operation. The direct participation of the Indian forces as allied forces expedited the fall of Dhaka. Without such a participation, the liberation of Bangladesh would have dragged on with an uncertain future and realized the significance of this participation. Indian policy had set 4 specific determinants. Primary consideration was undoubtedly humanitarian. Second, the controversial but not unrealistic is the strategic ambition of cutting Pakistan to size. Third, the load of refugees was a burden which could not economically be sustained indefinitely. Therefore, India had a stake in finishing the war as quickly as possible. Fourth, a prolongation of the liberation war would have complicated the naturalized problem and radicalized the volatile Northeast. Concluding observations. 2 clear observations emerge out of this discussion. First, despite an apparent difference of stance between Washington and Moscow vis-à-vis Bangladesh Liberation War, there was an implicit common ground between the two. Such a common ground is revealed in the National Security Staff Memorandum of 25th May 1971 to Kissinger. It was written, quote, in the short run, at least we share a strong interest with the Soviets in avoiding another Indo-Pak war. The Soviets are very little proud in Islamabad, but they do have a special relationship with New Delhi. Is it possible and desirable to encourage the Soviets to play a peacemaking role? Or would some sort of consultation and joint or at least parallel action with the Soviets be more in our interests? There is hardly any, unquote, there is hardly any doubt that until 3rd December the US-Soviet policy evolved the way suggested in the memorandum. Second, despite flurry of rhetorics, the pro or anti-Bangladesh policy of the involved powers was determined not by an ideology, but by national strategic interests. Thank you very much indeed for giving me a question here. Thank you.